The action is really ramping up here at BlizzCon 2019 as we slide our way to the winners finals of each group. This is the Hearthstone Grandmaster Global Finals. I'm Frodan, your master of ceremonies, and coming up next, we're gonna get to who is advancing to the top 4 and who is gonna be sent home. With that, in Group A, the stage has been set as we have 2 players from the East ready to go head-to-head. Let's go ahead and meet them, shall we? The first player, representing South Korea from Team T1, his second Worlds appearance. Please welcome Surrender! And their opponent, the 2018 BlizzCon Hearthstone Global Games champion. Please welcome to the stage from Royal Never Give Up, Lee! Players, shake hands. And with that, let's get this winners match underway.
Thank you, Frodan. Eventually, I'm going to come to one of these and just be breaking down laughing. Frodan is absolutely killing it out there on stage. And so are these 2 players that we have as they are in the winner's side of their bracket right now. Surrender and Lee both picking up an opening win in their opening series, both putting in very, very strong performances. But now that they're here, now they're going head-to-head, saying, what does this series look like to you?
To me, all of Group 1 was kind of the dichotomy between control decks and the tempo decks.
Okay.
So we saw PNC and Casey brought some of the slower lineups, and we see that Lee and Surrender actually have a mirror match coming up. They've both brought the more tempo-oriented lineup, and they've both made it through to the winner's match here.
Yeah, I think that goes to show that it is being a fairly effective strategy for these players here as well. Slight differences in the way that they built some of the decks, but very, very similar lineups overall. We can take a look at how these players have got to this point. It's been a very short road for them so far today, but a very long road in terms of the Grandmasters program as a whole for them to reach this point. You can see Lee picked up a win in our opener against PNC. Surrender defeated Casey to get through to this position. You can see PNC and Casey, if you're a fan of either of those 2 players, do not despair because that match will be coming up for you a little bit later on as well. This is double elimination here in this group stage, so no players have yet been eliminated. But looking at the way the series is panning out, I would expect to see Protect Shaman coming out from both of these players. What are we suspecting in terms of the bans?
For the bans, both players have opted to ban out the opponent's Rogue deck.
Okay.
And being a full tempo lineup, Rogue is fairly good against the Priest. It's also very good against the Paladin. So in the end, they've kind of leveled themselves, and it'll likely be a matchup between the Shamans and the Priests coming up.
I know in our previous series, we were both a little bit confused about how the Hunter ban ended up happening. But I think this time you're saying that the bans seem a lot more logical, at least from where we're sat. Rogue, the expected ban on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why they've brought Rogue is that Rogue thrives a lot in these tempo mirror matchups. So it's basically the second best deck akin to Shaman here. So as long as Shaman is protected, Rogue seems like the next logical ban in the setup for both lineups here.
You can see a little bit of information about Lee for you there. He has made it to a world stage before with the Summer Championships. Of course, that is a cross-region event, so he does have experience playing against some of the world's best. He had some big words in that tournament, if I remember rightly. He was interviewed, and it was through translation, of course, but he seemed to be saying, I feel like I am one of, if not the best player here, and I am going to prove that and prove that you can win tournaments, win games of Hearthstone by just being the better player. I think it's fair to say that he didn't quite live up to those words during that tournament. He had a disappointing performance, both in results and honestly, I think in the way he played as well. I think there were some pretty identifiable mistakes in the way he played. But from what I hear from the Chinese side of things, he is an incredibly well-respected player, and he does kind of live up to that billing through Chinese tournaments.
Right, certainly he does have a reputation for kind of tweaking decks and coming up with his own innovation. And throughout the Saviors of Old Doom expansion, he was one of the first to play the OTK Paladin. He piloted that deck to great success there. So that kind of sets it up where you would think that Lee would have brought OTK Paladin to this tournament, but instead, you know, he's also pushing above his comfort level and going for the full tempo lineup, and instead opting for the Highlander Paladin, and it seems to be working out thus far.
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? Whereas even if you have these biases, these pet decks, these favorite decks, you still are able to be critical and be unbiased in your lineup construction and just still bring the best lineup, right? Even if your pet deck isn't a part of it.
Well, Sato, I've been having this pet deck Zoo Warlock for the past couple of years, but at some point you got to realize when it's not right for the meta and kind of move on. And I think RNGLeaoh has done a great job of recognizing that for this field.
Fair enough. Shaman Mirror yet again. Myself and Saiyan are now 3 for 3 on the Shaman Mirror's opening, although I guess Mirror is a little bit inaccurate here as Surrender is on that Quest Shaman. Lee is on the straight up Token Shaman. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
We collected 3 Shaman Mirrors. Are we able to upgrade to Shaman Mirror level 2, given the new Battlegrounds kind of thing going on?
I mean, I haven't had a chance to get my hands on Battlegrounds yet, so I don't know what the mechanics are, but you might just be onto something.
I mean, certainly it is a Shaman Mirror, but they are very different Shamans in essence. RNGLeaoh has brought the Evolve Shaman, and Surrender has brought the Quest list. So in this matchup, I believe the Evolve Shaman is actually slightly favored. They're able to get on board, stick the Soul of the Murlocs before the Quest Shaman can react. A lot of times that's enough to push through the extra damage with the Bloodlust to follow that up.
How good is the Sandstorm Elemental? I guess that's like the one big advantageous tool that the Quest Shaman has available to them that isn't available to the Evolve Shaman. Do you think that has a big impact in the matchup?
Yeah, certainly the Quest Shaman in this case does get to be the ultimate reactor with the Sandstorm Elemental, with the Mind Control tag.
Sure.
I mean, both decks are sporting Desert Hare and Evolve. Both decks are sporting the Mogu Flesh Shaper, so they do have those inherent swing turns available, but of course, the Quest Shaman needs to keep the quest. They're a lot less likely to find those combinations of swing cards early on in the game, and that's kind of where the Evolve Shaman strives, is taking up those first 4 or 5 turns, getting too far ahead for the Quest Shaman to deal with.
Surrender, after much deliberation, is going to go Slurper. Lackey here hits the Titanic Lackey, which is one of the better outcomes in that spot. Being able to just protect his 2-1 on board from just the trade coming back the other way.
And here RNGLeaoh already falling slightly behind on board. This can kind of happen if the Lackey rolls don't go your way, but I'd like to see RNGLeaoh try and contest a little bit with the Lackey in hand and just follow that up into a frog turn, and then we should see some real explosive turns coming out from the Evolve Shaman.
Really, you want to see the Witchy Lackey used this turn?
We do have the Evolve, and it seems like RNGLeaoh might be going for the Thunderhead follow-up, trying to find the Voltaic Burst and go for Evolve the entire board. It would be nice to have specifically with Mogu, but cleaning up the board state a little bit here is always quite nice. Here the 2-drop a little bit understated means Surrender is going to maintain his control of the board state here.
Yeah, I guess the curve does make sense this way. I think crucially as well, if you fall behind as the Token Shaman in this matchup, Quest Shaman doesn't punish you as quickly and as devastatingly as Token Shaman would if it gets ahead, right? Like if Token Shaman gets 3 or 4 minions on board and you can't kill them, then suddenly it's Sea Giant, it's Mogu, it's Soul of the Forest, it's everything that just completely blows out the board state. Whereas I think the Token Shaman is okay being behind in this position, especially when Lee has Thunderhead in hand, like you were talking about, which can recover things for him quite quickly.
I mean, certainly this is uphill battle for the Quest Shaman, but I mean, this is like check 1, right? It's not completely losing in board state in the early game at this point.
Right.
Check number 2 would be dealing with the explosive turns that are about to come up through turns 4 and 5.
Surrender deep in the tank on this one.
And it's a variety of the 2-drops you could be playing with this deck. Questing Explorer, the best body on board. He's maybe contemplating Evil Totem first, just because getting some extra Lackey generation going on is going to benefit him now and just kind of add to an increase in value as things go on. And he might be able to do the Lackey generation now and trying to get an extra Lackey out of this, and he's specifically eyeing something like MC Tech being able to steal 2 minions when the quest is done as early as possible for him.
think this leans towards the idea that your opponent wants to play Frog this turn a lot of the time as well, right? Like if Frog is getting played, it's kind of hard for them to do anything that contests an evil totem. So you might as well get the Lackey generation going from that. It needs to be, exactly Zap to take care of it on this turn, which Lee does have, but that's also kind of his go-to card with that Thunderhead right now as well. Is it a slow turn for Lee? Just set up the Frog, invest into his turn 4 with Thunderhead and Coin?
Yeah, I'm thinking Lee wants to hold off, like you're saying, with the Zap and not overreact too much to the evil totem. He will have a much more powerful turn if he decides to wait.
Both players very much taking their time here. I feel like Lee in particular has slowed down quite significantly from what we saw in his first series. The magnitude of the situation here on the global stage at BlizzCon starting to dawn on these players. It's fascinating because I spoke to Fino backstage just before he came out for his match, and he just said he wasn't feeling any pressure whatsoever, which was which was incredible for me to hear. And then, but for him to then go and back that up by going out there and like playing so well after that as well. Because normally when people say like, "Oh yeah, I'm not feeling any pressure," I'm like, "Yeah, all right, buddy. Like, it's okay. You can admit that you're nervous. That's fine, But like Fino genuinely seemed like he was well in control of his emotions.
I mean, I am a little bit biased here, and Fino and I are in the same practice group, and we made sure that Fino got in early, got adjusted to the time zone, and we played, countless games of the matchups versus Bloody Face. So he definitely looked very comfortable out there, and I remember Orange tweeting about the matchup as well. I think everyone was very satisfied with the way he prepped and the way he looked out there today.
Yep, it was a heck of a series. But back in the now. Surrender needs to either consolidate a pretty big lead very quickly, or at least end up with a pile full of very effective answers in hand. This is going to be a huge swing turn for Lee.
Surrender being the first Shaman to go wide is usually a pretty bad sign, because the Evolved Shaman is almost always there to punish such an aggressive push. For Lee, not quite finding the right answers for this situation just yet. He might have to just throw out the Thunderhead and gain board control and hope that he's able to stick a wide enough board for the board minion effects to snowball later on in the series.
Right. Yeah, crucially, he just doesn't really have the punish card here, right? Like he has the swing card with the Thunderhead, but he doesn't have the like Sea Giant or Mogu Flesh Shaper or whatever else to be able to really punish Surrender for going so wide first on board like you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super awkward decision for him, because it does feel like it's the right time to go in and utilize the Frog alongside the Thunderhead, but if he does so, he's going to be overloaded next turn, likely by 2 mana, so he won't be able to throw the Vicina down as a follow-up to his swing turn here.
Is there any way he can have an effective turn while only overloading once?
Actually, Lee gonna go ahead. Now that he saw that they take first off of the point, just play the Vicina now, and maybe use the Thunderhead as a follow-up.
This makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Wow, this actually deals with the board very efficiently. This is a very, very clean play from Lee here.
Yes. Ooh, and you see Surrender's reaction. He's got some Hearthstone to play now, finally picking up that Mogu Flesh Shaper to go alongside that Mutate. That is the first real big punish card that either player has picked up in the matchup.
I mean, the current board state, it looks a little tricky to deal with the Vicina, but you're able to play the Mogu first, evolve it, and then likely rush out that A-drop to actually deal with the Vicina on board. So Surrender might be thinking about just going for that kind of line. If you use both of the Goblin Lackeys, you can also deal with the 1-2 if you're rushing out the other Goblin Lackey as well. Or if you're rushing out the Witchy Lackey here.
Oh, I see.
Because you have to save the, yeah. I certainly would not be wanting to leave the Vicina on board, so Surrender going for that Novice play is a little concerning here.
Yeah, if the Novice comes down, he's locked out of that Goblin Lackey play that rushes the 8-drop like you were talking about. He would play Novice, Mogu would cost 2 still, which is, it's still the same situation here. He played a 1-mana minion first, but the scenario is still the same. His Mogu comes down costing 1 and uses up his last mana for the turn, which means, yeah, the Vicina gets to live here. Still gets to live. Does hit the rush minion off the 8-drop, but it's only the 3-8.
Yeah, actually, in this event, the Goblin Lackey would not have been able to stop it.
That is true, yeah.
So Lee now, with the Vicina intact, is able to go for, let's say, Thunderhead Zap, and then the 2 3-1s it summons will be able to deal with the Gilneas Royal Guard. And then from there on, suddenly you've stuck 2 threats on the board that are seemingly uncontested for now.
Okay, you've passed test number 1 of casting with me. You have to know card names, because I absolutely don't, so good job. That is a check mark in the positive column for saying. Covering my weaknesses beautifully.
Yeah, it seems like Lee recognizes that he's losing some control of the board here and fights back with the Thunderhead roll here. At this point, he's essentially all in. The next big wave that we're going to see from Lee is potentially a Hair Evolve, and that's going to need to come sooner than later because the Shaman quest is already done. He's still at 30 health.
Right.
So Surrender looks to be pulling quite ahead on the board state here.
Yeah, you love to see early damage coming through here as the Token Shaman in this matchup, because the more and more time goes on, the more you're going to get blown out by some of these cards they have available. If the Quest Shaman gets to the point where they can play their Sandstorm Elementals, play their Mind Control techs, and then play Shudderwock later on in the game, like that is really, really hard to beat.
Right, I mean, outside of the current board state that RNGLeaoh has, if this gets removed, the Stormbringer is dead in hand, Soul of the Murlocs is dead in hand, Lightning Bolt fairly useless at this point, and Evil Totem not really going to make too much of an impact, just kind of something for the Quest Shaman to run over.
Vicina gets to live again. Surrender just completely disrespecting that card now at this point. I think this one's a lot more reasonable, right? Like, he's seen a Voltaic Burst get used, he's seen a Thunderhead get used. Unlikely that this Vicina can have any real impact on the board state here anyway, and plus his entire board is 1/1s, so the Vicina is almost impossible to have any real impact on the board this turn.
I mean, absolutely. At this point, Lee might even be thinking about evolving the Vicina into a 5-drop, just to have something that sticks.
Yep.
And his board state might be 2 to 3 minions going into the Stormbringer turn. I'm really struggling to piece together the out, but it has to be some very nice legendaries off of Stormbringer in my mind.
Right. Because Evil Totem evolves Soul of the Murloc here. He gets himself a Lackey in hand, then he'll be on 7 on the following turn. Just play Lackey Stormbringer. Chance he finds Faceless Lackey there as well, which is obviously the nuts in that situation.
I like what Lee's going for here. He's likely going to play the Evil Totem after the evolve, because the Evil Totem will afford him a 1-cost minion, which is basically adding another minion to the Stormbringer turn that's about to come up. He's not going to play it now, so maybe Lee is not feeling like he needs to rely on the Stormbringer just yet here.
Yeah, this is interesting to me. I feel like if it was a Soul of the Murloc turn, then having the Evil Totem in play was just better than pressing the Totem? Potentially? Difficult to say.
Yeah, definitely dire times for Lee here. Once this board gets dealt with, which it won't for this turn, but having an extra 1-drop would have been very nice, I think, going to Stormbringer. He really doesn't have much to go off of now, because certainly the board state now has been lost. The only way he can really come back is if he goes tall with the board, right? And that requires the big legendary minions from Stormbringer. But because he didn't play the Evil Totem, we're going to have to wait another turn before he gets that kind of ideal setup going.
Right.
Or maybe he's just okay with the 2 minions here. They have to be some pretty darn good legendaries, though.
They sure would. Yeah, I just feel like the one outer of the Faceless Lackey from the Evil Totem is just such a big deal alongside that Stormbringer. It's just worth going for in my mind. Lee clearly has a different plan. It's going to need to be a heck of a plan, because he is miles behind currently.
So the best card for RNGLeaoh here would be Voltaic Burst to go alongside the Stormbringer.
Sure.
Getting to mutate, not quite what he's looking for here. So Lee, deep in thought here. Is this the Stormbringer that makes or breaks my winner's match here versus Surrender?
I mean, what even are the outs from 2 legendaries here against this board state?
Well, the nice thing about Doom and the Tomb is it brought back some pretty premium legendaries like Ragnaros that you can get off of this, and that might be a leading point, but...
So did you say Heist Baron Togwaggle Keeper Steladris was the outs?
You know, this is probably the average result that you would get off of Stormbringer for 2 minions, but we needed something way higher than average for Lee here.
Right. He needed some Malachirs, some Rags, some Tyrians, Sylvanas.
I think Rag, Tyrion could have got the job done here.
Yeah. Shavala, potentially, I guess. Pretty impactful on this board.
Yeah, Surrender should have very little trouble clearing this up. And even the Shutterwalk to boot later on.
Surrender very quickly referring back to these deck lists he has in front of him. Just making sure he's not missing anything.
I think maybe the thing on Surrender's mind right now is the 1-of copy of Haunting Visions in Lee's Shaman deck.
Okay.
And that can kind of lead to the 1-out of the Haunting Visions pulling something like Earthquake to deal with the board, resetting the advantage that he has now, so he doesn't want to commit too much, and he knows that the Shutterwalk will give him a secondary wave anyway. So for Lee, the Stormbringer out has already been used. These evil totems are going to fetch 1 lackey apiece. It's not really adding up to the 30 life that the Surrender is currently still sitting pretty at.
What to do?
At the same time, I just don't really think he has too much of an option. The good news is that he can create a board that in theory doesn't get cleared this turn. Since there's only 3 attacks available currently on the other side of the board.
Yeah, I can definitely sympathize with Lee's frustration here. I mean, I've played a lot of these Shaman mirrors, and I'm definitely in the camp, and I think that the Evolved Shaman should be favored in this matchup, but some of the times, like, your hands are just a little less consistent than the Quest Shaman, and they happen to have that early board start.
Sure.
And you end up with lackeys in your hand and no board for the Soul of the Murlocs, and then it feels pretty bad to end the game with Shaman at 30 health, and it seems like what went wrong with, you know, my deck versus his.
Yep. Surrender here, just going to use this Shutterwalk as a tempo engine, a value engine. Plenty of lackey generators and card draw in there, as well as this board state that's getting created. Makes himself a nice convenient 3-3 rush to take care of the last thing on the board as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking all but over in game 1 here. For RNGLeaoh, I mean, I don't see any plays that were too impactful. I think both sides played it pretty well. Just kind of the early game didn't pan out that well for Lee, and the board ended up getting cleared. The Vicina, I mean, it was pretty good recognition from Surrender to leave it up, and at that point, you know, the Vicina wasn't going to make an impact because we've already seen some of these tokens being rushed out.
Yep. Yeah, I think Lee's recognition to use the Vicina on that turn, where we were primarily talking about Thunderhead, was very smart. I think Surrender's response of just leaving the Vicina up was pretty intelligent as well. You can kind of see that because the air quotes punish happened for leaving the Vicina up. Like, the Thunderhead was there with the minions rushing alongside that, and Surrender was just kind of fine with that scenario, right? So if, like, the punish for a scenario is something that you deal with anyway, then you're usually in a pretty good spot to just be able to ignore that punish exists.
Yeah, the Sandstorm Elemental coming out here too as well.
Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't quite work the way that you would like it to ideally, with the Death Rattle going off after both procs if the Sandstorm Elemental happens. But Surrender not in the slightest bit interested. Lethal damage by pushing through the Taunt, doubles up on the Cobalt Battlecry, and that is a very, very clean and simple win for Surrender, who goes 1-0 up in this series. And Surrender looking to put a stop to this China win streak that we've had so far today, as the Chinese representatives have made very quick work of their opening matches in the group stage to be in these winners' positions.
And I think a thing to note there is we saw how fast Surrender played out that last turn, right? He recognized lethal almost immediately.
Yep.
And that just kind of shows and attests to like how comfortable and how strong of a player he is there, because you get into this habit, right, against the Evolved Shaman where you're like, I need to clear this, I need to play around Bloodlust, trade. And that's usually the first thing people see in those scenarios. Surrender immediately in the back of mind was already calculating lethal, figuring out his outs, and just a wonderful performance by him in game 1.
I think that's the most common scenario where you'll see like a top player miss lethal is a spot like that where your brain just tells you, well, if I just play around Bloodlust, I never lose, right? So you clear their board and you just don't even look at whether you can win the game. But Surrender was on those Galaxy Brain lines. He already saw that there was no need to play around anything because he had the game locked up with lethal damage. So he goes up to a 1-0 lead in this series. Do not go anywhere, guys. Plenty more Lee versus Surrender right after this.
BlizzCon 2019 is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of BlizzCon. Facebook Gaming, a world of play. Samsung SSD, performance gamers trust. Corsair, do your thing. And by NVIDIA.
My name is Jung-soo Kim. I am Surrender.
네, 블리즈컨이라는 곳은 모든 블리자드 게이머들한테 꿈의 무대 같은 곳이잖아요. 근데 제가 한 번도 블리즈컨을 이때까지 가본 적은 없어가지고요. 그래서 블리즈컨에서 대회할 기대도 되고요. 그리고 게이머로서 블리즈컨 행사를 살펴볼 생각에 또 기대됩니다. 아마도 제 생각에는 첫 번째로 월드 챔피언십에 진출했을 때인 것 같아요. 월드 챔피언십에 진출하기 위해서 그 전에 서머 챔피언십에서 우승을 했었고, 서머 챔피언십에서 정말 뭐 퍼플이라든지 오렌지라든지 정말 뛰어난 세계국급 선수들을 꺾고 우승을 했기 때문에 그때부터 많은 선수들한테 인정을 받기 시작하면서 저 자신에 대해서 되게 자랑스러웠고 저 자신을 세계급 플레이어라고 칭할 수 있게 된 것 같아요. 저희 부모님은 제가 하는 일에 대해서 항상 자랑스러워하세요. 제가 무슨 일을 하든 항상 응원해주시고, 다른 한국계 부모님들은 되게 자식이 하는 일에 간섭하고 약간 컨트롤하려는 경향이 강한데, 근데 저희 부모님은 좀 되게 다르셨던 것 같아요. 저희 아버지가 아마도 어렸을 때부터 스타크래프트를 되게 좋아하셔서 실제로 스타크래프트 PC방 대회 같은 데 나가셨던 적이 있거든요. 그래서 좀 더 오픈된 문화가 아니었을까 해요. 일단 당장은 이때까지 한국 선수가 한 번도 해본 적 없었고, 그리고 저도 해본 적 없었던 결승전 진출을 당연히 목표로 하고 있고요. 물론 당연히 우승하는 게 훨씬 좋기는 해요. 근데 다른 선수들에 비해서 큰 대회 경험이 많기 때문에 좀 더 저한테 유리한 것 같기도 하고요. 그래서 저는 되게 저는 우승할 수 있을 만한 자신이 있는 것 같아요. 제가 글로벌 파이널에 진출하고 나서 되게 한국 팬들이 많이 저를 응원해주시는 분들이 많으셨는데, 그분들한테 정말 감사하고 그분들의 응원에 뒤처지지 않는 성적을 거둘 수 있도록 노력하겠습니다.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Hearthstone Grandmasters Global Finals here at BlizzCon. We have Surrender and Lee deep in the midst of their winners match in Group A. It's an all-Eastern affair, which might be a little surprising to some of the people who have seen the Eastern regions generally underperform in favor of Americas and Europe when we get to these final, global events at the end of the year. Although, of course, Tom60229, your APAC World Champion in 2017, might have something to say about that. But regardless, Surrender goes up to a 1-0 lead with a very clean, simple-looking win with his Quest Shaman versus the Token Shaman from Lee. So where does that leave us with the remainder of the series?
I mean, I do want to stress that although it is a Shaman mirror, Surrender winning with the Quest Shaman is kind of a bigger deal as a Game 1 start to the series, because the Quest Shaman is a little bit weaker against the Combo Priest, which both players have also opted to leave up. So this Shaman win for Surrender means it's a little bit harder for RNGLeaoh to find the 2 wins necessary on his side. Going into the next game, I believe it's going to be a Combo Priest mirror. Both of their decks look pretty standard. RNGLeaoh does have a Holy Ripple in there, which can be kind of effective when it comes down to the trading that goes on early on in the Priest mirror.
You can see Surrender's build of the deck here. This is pretty much the Grandmasters list that we saw for multiple weeks across all regions. Or at least APAC in the latter weeks all caught up and ended up bringing Combo Priest for the majority of the time. And now taking a look at Lee's version, you see there the extra slight tech that he has to counteract the extra healing effect, I guess, from Lee's side, just to be able to swing back some of the board states, draw some extra cards off Nausea Cleric, and crucially, deal a point of damage to face while being off board, which is actually completely impossible for Priest to do otherwise.
And I believe the graphics are a little bit reversed here. RNGLeaoh's Priest does not have a Bomb Swamp in the list, and I believe Surrender's is the more standard list from the many weeks of Grandmasters that we've seen this play it out.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, according to our paper copies, Lee has the Holy Ripple, no Bomb Samdi, and Surrender has the Bomb Samdi, no Holy Ripple. So I guess we will wait with bated breath to see whether the graphic was right or whether our paper is right. See if those cards get drawn during this series.
I mean, it's a pretty important tech card going into the Priest mirror, because you can be even on board, but then whoever draws a Bomb Swamdi on 7 ends up drawing the card draw engine, so the Northside Cleric makes the draws going on.
Sure.
Outside of that, a little bit stronger, and generally allows the Priest mirror to be decided if it hasn't already been in the first early few turns.
What percentage of games do you think in the Priest mirror actually stretch out that far where it becomes, a little bit more about attrition and resources and Bomb Samdi can come into play? Because we've seen a lot of early blowouts in Priest mirrors, right?
Right, definitely. Like, you're looking for the inner fire, you're looking for the powered shield. You're looking just to build one big minion early on, but sometimes, the opponent has the since they're both running 2 copies of Silence, the Silence effect to kind of mitigate that board state. And then at that point, your commitment is not rewarded, and something like Bomb Swamdi can really push you back in once the opponent starts building their own board state.
You can see Surrender does quick up the Bomb Samdi, and so we were right. Always trust the casters. That's the lesson to learn from that one. Surrender playing the Bomb Samdi, and Lee playing that extra copy of Holy Ripple in place of the big 7 mana card.
Yeah, and certainly the turn 1 Light Warden here is a little threatening, but with no targets to heal, Surrender is pretty safe in terms of playing just the injured Tol'Vir, having it contest the 1-2 actively, because the only way he could really buff it up is to heal the injured Tol'Vir.
Yeah, at that point, the Tol'Vir would be at 5 health anyway, so still out of range of the buffed up Light Warden. Surrender goes Cleric, though, which is a little bit interesting to me.
So what really is the big punish for going Cleric on 1?
Well, it's not a big punish, but you give your opponent the vanilla play of just like poke face, heal your face, and then they have a 3-2 against your 1-3.
Yeah, that is actually pretty annoying, right?
Right, like what's Surrender's response to that play if that happens?
I kind of just like that subtle. The instinctual play there makes a lot of sense. You're contesting very well on board. I mean, Lee going for the powered shield, maybe he's hoping to hit the inner fire to deal with the Northside Cleric, but I mean, it seems like the heal already did more than enough in this case.
I got you, friend.
But certainly it does still contest the Cleric, and you can always heal at the preceding turn, so the Light Warden is definitely still a threat in this case.
This Light Warden is going to present a huge problem for Surrender going forward here. Just about every play he wants to make starts to get checked by that Light Warden. Still, the Tolvir looks like the only really appealing thing against this board state.
And for Surrender, there's no great way for him to really deal with the Warden. He needs to find the silence effect at this point, or potentially a Divine Spirit Inner Fire from the Northshire to deal with it.
Right. And now here's the long-term effect of that Coin Tolvir not being played on turn 1, is that now that 1 face damage has happened, it's happened, right? Like that target is there, available for Lee to be able to make it that heal if he needs to, and buff up the Light Warden on any turn where it's effective, which it already is here on turn 3 for Lee if he wants to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, not playing out the Tolvir, this is kind of like the Ultra Punish, where the Light Warden already kind of out of control. Surrender looking basically at this point just to find the silence to deal with it. For RNGLeaoh, healing the opponent's face and dealing with the Tolvir already puts him pretty far ahead. He could also just choose to add to the board state, playing out his curve here as well. But I'm kind of liking the heal at this point. It's pretty effective at developing the board already.
Yep. Definitely agree. Surrender's going to need some help here, and that does fall under the category of some help.
Help in the terms of playing extra arms, coin the Inner Fire. It's a lot of resources, but you are dealing with the immediate threat, and at the same time, the 1/2 does not contest on its own the 2 health Northshire Cleric.
And yeah, crucially, you are winning the board for the first time in this game. And I will, in the Priest Mirror, I will expend almost up to an unlimited amount of resources if it leaves me ahead on board at the end of the turn.
Not to mention, it leaves you ahead with a Northshire Cleric that's unanswered, which can in turn draw you more resources. So it definitely seems like a worthy gambit for Surrender here to go all in on the board state.
Completely agree. It
also feels like there's very little else you can do on this turn, right?
Exactly. And it kills your opponent's punish minion. Like you were talking about how it leaves the Cleric alive. And there's certain minions in this matchup which are just a nightmare for both sides, right? Because all the healing effects are symmetrical. This, in one fell swoop, kills that minion for your opponent, which is the Light Warden, while leaving you with a Cleric in play, which is massively punishing. But Lee picks up the silence here, which was about his best possible answer on this turn.
Yeah, I think this was by far his best draw. Able to go ahead and play out the Psycho Pump on curve and at the same time eliminate the threat of the Northshire, which we've already seen Surrender commit so much to.
Lee is very deep on this one, though.
Probably just jotting down the Inner Fire effects being used, the fact that there's more arms left in the hand. Making sure he doesn't miss a single beat here in the Priest Mirror.
Yeah, big difference here live on the BlizzCon stage, because of course for the regular weeks of the regular seasons of Grandmasters, deck tracking software was legal. And most players, of course, chose to use that advantage when it was available to them. Very, very different when you've got to do everything manually with pen and paper and just manual tracking here live on the BlizzCon stage.
Yeah, this was more or less a calculated rope. You kind of get the feeling by the way Lee played out the turn that he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he just kind of use that extra time to acquire some more information, get some reads, and then tactical rope is actually a very real thing here, I would say.
And now the situation is reversed yet again. It's Lee with the minion in play that punishes all the healing effects, and Surrender has lost his to that silence effect. More arms here is looking a lot less attractive than the extra arms did on the previous turn. It's just not effective against the board state, really.
At this point, Surrender's got to be thinking, how do I make it to the Bomb Swamp-D? And I'm kind of liking just throwing out the Acolyte.
Kind of with you, yeah. It's not great, but I don't really see anything that is this turn. 2 cards in hand in Nephset Ritualist that kind of actively hurt you in this situation. Acolyte can dig you to Pyromancer's Silence, Topsy-Turvy. the few cards that are able to kind of swing back board states in the Priest Mirror.
Oh, this is interesting too. Actually, Surrender going for the full tempo line, going for double never set Ritualist, no value, but at the same time not giving the opponent any value. And it's maybe going to be enough to contest the Light Warden and the Reborn half of it afterwards as well. So Surrender definitely valuing fighting for board here, trying as hard as he can to get to the Bomb Swamd, which may in turn actually be able to turn this Priest Mirror around at some point.
Sure. It's ambitious, I guess, to assume that these 2/3s are going to contest board, but I think the Acolyte play is also just ambitious in a different way, right? Like, you really do need to be ripping the perfect cards off the Acolyte draws in that situation.
Yeah, and it's Surrender's deck list actually only runs one Wild Pyromancer, so it's actually pretty difficult when he starts falling behind in the Priest Mirror. Kind of an awkward situation from Lee as well. He is ahead on board, but you know, there's not that much follow-up. He's maybe thinking about playing down the second Psychopomp. Currently in the res pool, there is a Light Warden and
the other Psychopomp. Yeah. Surrender does get his payout though. He is going to be able to use these 2/3s to contest the two Light Wardens, or the Light Warden and the Reborn Light Warden. It's worked out pretty nicely for him. It's the full tempo play.
And going through Surrender's options here, he could be considering more armsing the Nephroset Ritualist, killing off the Acolyte, and just simply not healing it. There is definitely some merit in limiting your opponent's card draw options when you have the Bomb Swamd in your hand and you know that they don't have it in their list.
Sure, yeah,
so,
that makes sense.
Given the fact that, I mean, Lee had kind of weak turn going to turn 5, it seems like he doesn't have things like Injured Blade Master and Circle of Healing combinations like that, right? Or Injured Tolvir. So his plays on the board have been pretty weak. If we limit card draw, we're more likely to make it to the Bomb Swamd turn. So Surrender definitely considering his options of removing the immediate threat of Light Warden or limiting the card draw from the Acolyte.
Yeah. I think with the high health total minion that you're creating here as well, and with one silence used from Lee, leaving this Light Warden up isn't really going to punish you that hard, right? Like, you might take one big hit from it on the following turn, but then you're almost certainly going to have that Nephroset Ritualist on board to be able to contest it. Surrender does seem to disagree though. He's kind of doing the opposite of what we talked about. He's just allowing the card draw to be matched on both sides when he is the player with the Bomb Swamd in hand.
So Surrender starting off with Shield just meant that he was looking for a better play, and he considered the Injured Blade Master a little bit there, but in the end decided to go with his card draw option instead. I mean, it's a pretty big punish if you leave up the Acolyte and a Wild Pyromancer does come out, but at the same time, that's kind of why he's opting to play his own Acolyte into this board state. So he's saying, if you're drawing, I'm also drawing at the same time.
Lee, though, going to use the Inner Fire to deny that. It's kind of the nightmare scenario for Surrender in this position. Let's see what this draw is. Injured Tolvir. Make Lee very interested in pushing for board this turn. He still has 2 Clerics remaining in his deck, so that Circle of Healing does have a lot of upside for him. But he can actually just use it to draw a card here if he wants to, alongside this Wild Pyromancer and Acolyte. Kind of into holding onto it though. I think it does have a lot of upside with the remainder of his deck.
It has upside with the Northside Cleric, but at the same time, Surrender also could potentially be silencing the Acolyte of Pain. So was it worth not cashing in the guaranteed draw here in the hopes of drawing the Northside Cleric later? I think that RNGLeaoh is beginning to lose kind of his lead on this game here. And that silence coming out from Surrender means that Acolyte will have only drawn 1 this game.
Right.
And that could be very detrimental. I mean, Lee might be looking back and saying, well, the circle looked very good for Cleric later, but what if this Cleric doesn't ever show up now?
Right. It is, like, I do get the logic, and I do still kind of support it, because the Circle of Healing isn't a good tempo play here, right? Because the board state, in terms of the health total, just ends up exactly where it started if you pyro Circle of Healing, right? So because they get injured for 1 again afterwards. And so I can definitely buy the logic. But of course, you do also just get an extra Pyromancer in play as well, which is not nothing in the situation. It does seem like with this silence drawn, Saiyan did call out before it came as being the big punish for this situation. That Lee might just be starting to lose his grip on this mirror.
And Surrender is slowly chipping away at the board state. This injured Blademaster making a huge deal in terms of who's going to end up ahead here. And then Bomswandi coming out. I think Surrender might have actually turned the tables here a little bit.
Yeah, I think this was a crucial turn for Surrender to play maximum tempo, right? Because next turn he's playing War Golem. Like, he needs to be able to play War Golem and still be ahead, right? Like, he needs to just play 7-mana 7/7 and still be in control of the board state. So I think maxing out on just aggressive tempo this turn was definitely the way to do it.
You know, with the resources so limited on both sides, the War Golem, just the body itself is kind of threatening. I think if you actually just played War Golem here without the draw cards, RNGLeaoh would be disappointed.
You heard it here first, folks. America's Grandmaster just saying says put War Golem in your decks.
I mean, maybe not per se, but in this situation.
No, that's what you said. I'll hear nothing further on the subject.
I mean, here for Lee, I'd like to see the Acolyte ran in and maybe play out the Psychopomp in the hopes of resurrecting it. I think he has a 1 out of 3, maybe 1 out of 4 at this point. And just get back into the card draw mode, because without it, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I like that. Lee disagrees, but I find myself on Saiyan's side here. I think the Acolyte of Pain chance there did look significantly better to me. Maybe Lee's just saying that Light Warden was the target that he wanted because that's the most aggressive, the most punishing option for him in this spot.
Well, Light Warden can be very punishing as well, right? With the Pyromancer and the Circle in hand, if we pick up a Powered Shield to start the initial proc, and then maybe another Circle of Healing, could be that Light Warden actually just closes out the game on its own. In this case, for Surrender, not able to really deal with the Light Warden this turn. It seems like Bomb Swampy on curve. I'm not really seeing anything that makes too much more sense. More arms onto the injured Blademaster, and we can clear off an extra Psychopomp, but that's not going to make or break the points of RNGLeaoh finding lethal the following turn, I think.
Funnily enough, it might. So if the spell gets drawn here, it does. Okay, so now we actually have to do that. So 8 damage gets pushed immediately. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minions get injured.
Right, we're able to top seed the Psycho Pomp.
That's true.
Yeah,
yeah. Good point.
21 to 18, 8 minions, 16, 19. It actually ends up being lethal here.
Yep, I think so.
So actually RNGLeaoh snatching victory from the jaws of defeat as Surrender pulls out the Bomb Zombie tech on turn 7, but a little bit too slow. It seems like Light Warden is able to close this game out.
Yeah, and actually going back and looking at it, I think Lee recognized the spot very nicely. I think his decision to maximize his chances at a Light Warden as opposed to maximizing his chances as an Acolyte of Pain actually probably pans out better for him in that situation. Because I think if you take Cast Vision aside, I think Lee can potentially have a decent read on there being a Bonsamdi in his opponent's hand. It was a card that was there from the opening. It was drawn naturally on turn 1, I think, from Surrender. So it was a card that had been sat there the whole time. So I think in that situation, if Lee's thinking, well, my opponent wants to play Bonsamdi this turn, he's got 2 options: draw some cards with an Acolyte of Pain or kill you with a Light Warden. The Light Warden does seem to pan out a lot better.
Yeah, he ended up taking, I think, the 50-50 flip on the Light Warden and being rewarded with that, with the extra spell, Pyromancer, just slightly over lethal there. So RNGLeaoh spot, kind of in a bad spot in the Priest Mirror and kind of taking the more aggressive line, and it actually pans out very beautifully for him.
It did. Very, very interesting Priest Mirror, but we are going to have a quick word from our sponsors. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
2019 is brought to you by T-Mobile. Their newest signal goes farther than ever, and it's built 5G ready. MSI, True Gaming. Intel, the official CPU partner of BlizzCon. And by HyperX, we are all gamers.
just like that. They didn't even notice we were gone. 1-1 here in the series between Lee and Surrender. Winners match here in Group A. The winner of this one finds their way out of the groups. The loser of this will fall down into the decider game, which will happen tomorrow. So a lot on the line for both of these players. And Lee really just snatched a victory from the jaws of defeat, as Sam put it earlier, by finding that Light Warden line, just recognizing a spot where he could just push lethal damage through Surrender's expected play on turn 7 in the Priest Mirror. Saiyan set it up and said, hey, some of these Priest Mirrors don't just get blown out by Nausea Clerics in the early game. They go to these late game positions, and Bwonsamdi can be the difference maker. And it was the difference maker there, just not in the way that perhaps we were expecting.
I mean, I certainly ate my words on that one, right? And I think Lee going with the Light Warden there, recognizing that he needed to be aggressive in that spot. Going to the third game, it's likely that Lee will return onto the Evolved Shaman, and then Surrender has the option of playing out either the Priest again or the Highlander Paladin. And in this spot, I think I'm more or less favoring the Priest. It looks like it is going to be Surrender on Priest once more, and RNGLeaoh shifting back onto the Shaman.
Victory. You saw from the little cheeky view over Lee's shoulder that his mulligan had the Sludge Slurper Evil Totem in it. Do you think that Sludge Slurper is a reasonable card here in the early game just because of the activations it can give to Lickham? But if you don't have that Lickham, I think it's very tempting to mulligan very aggressively for it alongside Lightning Bolt if you're playing those in your deck, which Lee is playing a single copy of Lightning Bolt for the Priest matchup.
Yeah, certainly Lickham is the MVP card that Lee is looking for in his mulligan here. It'd be interesting to see what he keeps. I certainly don't like the Evil Totem. It doesn't do a whole lot in the early game.
Right.
And the Sludge Slurper is... I think you're being kind of optimistic when you keep it. But going first and you having Voltaic Burst, you can deal with the first minion that Priest throws down, so that's not terribly bad in that spot either. Actually, deciding to keep the pair is something that looks all right to me as well. Certainly just keeping a naked Sludge Slurper or the naked Voltaic Burst didn't look that good, but the combination is acceptable.
Yeah, 3 power on turn 2. It's not the perfect way to do it, but it is a way to do it. But now, I think, Lee, this is a very, very genuine turn 1 rope here from Lee, because yes, he has that kind of plan that he mulliganed for, that he kept the Sludge Slurper on 1, Voltaic Burst on 2 possibilities. But when you have Voltaic Burst and a Mogu Flesh Shaper in your opening hand, like, you start to imagine all kinds of different scenarios as to how to leverage those cards.
And certainly the Lackey pull being the Witchy Lackey is really going to affect RNGLeaoh's game plan as well. So now instead of focusing on clearing the board, he can say, go ahead, develop. I have kind of a very strong response with Voltaic Burst and the Mogu Flesh Shaper. And on top of that, Witchy Lackey in this instance will act as the Evolve effect, giving RNGLeaoh an 8-drop on the backswing as well.
Yep. And back when everyone was essentially playing Quest Shaman, I think Mogu was just the way you won the matchup. It was kind of the one thing that you played to. We saw what some people might think is like a disproportional level of blowouts in Grandmasters, where the Shamans were evolving into Batterheads and Walking Fountains and Rhinos and like all these perfect rush minions. But like genuinely, there's so many of those in the 8-drop slot that it's only like 1 in 5 to get one of those like insane rush minions that actually like blow out the game in that scenario. If you include like Tyrion and things like that, that are potential blowouts as well. With the addition of Rag, like the odds actually went up now in the new metagame as well for you to get one of the blowout minions.
Yeah, certainly the 8-drop pool is very impactful when your opponent also relies on the board. And this is kind of the strength of Shaman. Not only does the Mogu present a threat, but oftentimes 8-drop preceding is pretty hard to deal with as well.
Right.
There's little time.
Surrender goes full tempo on his turn. You like that? It's the 2/6.
Yeah, I think Surrender's got to kind of play a faster game plan here with the way his hand is panning out. And actually, Lee going ahead and playing the Witchy Lackey, deciding not to save it for the Mogu later on in the game.
I'm quite curious about this because his 2/1 on board versus a random 2-drop, which is about a 2/2, what he got, plus a 1/1 in play. I feel like either way, he's not contesting the 2/6. So I'm not sure how big a difference this makes. Does it change his Mogu mats like over the next 1 or 2 turns just to have this extra minion in play now?
I think from Surrender's side, this one minion isn't going to make that much of a difference. Most of the time, he's going to be able to build a board and react to everything that RNGLeaoh does. Maybe Lee felt desperate enough to go for a high roll on the 2-drop, such as Venomancer or Doomsayer in that spot.
Okay.
Potentially, he's even thinking that the Lackey costing 1 mana is already too much of a burden on his Mogu turn. He's more or less hoping to draw the Evolve or the Mutate later on in the game. So decision point for Lee. He's able to take control of this board if he goes for Voltaic, Burst, Mogu for the additional 1 mana, and then zapping down the Light Warden.
Right.
Or he could take it slow, hope there's no Divine Spirit, and go for Spirit of the Frog. So the choice here is A, based on a hand read, and 2, how many resources he's willing to commit. Because if he does go for the Burst and full board control this turn, he'll have only 2 mana remaining, Spirit of the Frog won't be able to be played, and he'll likely end up just going Totem Pass.
Sure.
Mogu is a 3-3 at that point, and it's not, or 3-2 actually. And it won't be able to contest very well, let's say, a injured Blade Master.
Yes. I like this Frog turn, because just the way the Mogu works out is kind of perfect here. Like, even if nothing else gets added to this board, the Frog never dies, right? So the Mogu starts the turn at 3, Voltaic Burst gets played, Mogu then costs 1. So at a bare minimum next turn with this play, you're able to Voltaic Burst, Mogu Flesh Shaper, Soul of the Forest, Zap. Which is, it feels like a much more powerful turn. Soul of the Forest. Why do we always do that? Soul of the Murloc. Soul of the Murloc and Zap. So over the course of 2 turns, I feel like you're making a much bigger swing turn by playing the Frog here than by going for the Mogu immediately.
Yeah, and I like that RNGLeaoh took the risk here. No Divine Spirit, but Divine Spirit and Inner Fire or something like that could have completely blown out the game. Luckily, those cards were not in Surrender's hand. And on average, I believe Lee ends up further ahead by going and playing the Frog here.
Agreed.
I like the patience from Lee at this point, and I think it's going to end up paying off. Surrender, though, picking up the Psychopomp is going to have more reload to the board coming up to turn 4.
Yep. Is this just another one of those tactical ropes from Surrender? Is he bluffing options? Because he has 0 options this turn, really, apart from whether or not he casts Circle of Healing. Is that a genuine decision point that's taken him all turn?
Yeah, I think these decision points, Surrender often will just kind of take the immediate benefit instead of hoping for the best later on. And the Circle could have been good with Northshire Cleric. It could have been good with the injured Blade Master, but he wants to go for max pressure at this point, realizing that he does have his next turn planned out with Psychopomp. So making sure he's able to play Psychopomp as cleanly as possible going to that turn is his main priority.
Sure. So now sequencing this turn is not easy. Zap is like a branching path in his turn because what it draws actually has an impact on what he's going to end up playing out the rest of his turn. But if he zaps the Light Warden, that increases the cost of his Mogu by 1 for the entire turn.
Right, so if Lee goes for Zap on the Light Warden now, it does branch between, like, let's say the Lightning Bolt, the Evolve, and the Voltaic Burst,
yes.
right? So here Lee decided to make sure he clears the main threat, and then getting the Evolve is pretty nice as well. And actually pulls out the Batterhead. And you've talked about game-ending 8-drops, and this is certainly the first one that comes to mind. Able to attack after it kills a minion means that Surrender basically has nothing great to play into it, despite having the Psychopomp on curve.
Yeah. And again, it seems ridiculous how often this happens, because it is. Like, the maths dictates that it is ridiculous how often this happens. There's only 31 8-drops, or 32 now, I believe, with Rag being added. And, like, one of those is Batterhead, one of those is Alakir, one of those is Walking Fountain, one of those is Tyrion, one of those is Ragnaros, one of those is Akali the Rhino. Like, I can keep going. Like, 8-drops are insane. Like, this just happens every game. It's just how it works.
For Surrender here, you can topsy-turvy the Batterhead, which feels very bad, but at the same time it means it's not dealing with your entire board.
Yep.
You know, Psychopomp, and you can kind of stall out for 1 additional turn, but that means Surrender needs to be pulling out the second Psycho Pump off the top to stay in the game going from turn 5 onwards, because certainly this Bomb Shandy is basically dead in the hand for now.
Quickly.
Deciding to get rid of the Tolvir this way and actually killing it off means that he has a chance of resing a good touch if you're not getting the Tolvir.
Not looking good for the Surrender fans out there. This batter head is about to run absolutely wild on this game. The 2-4 when you get it as an evolve in Shaman as well is just very, very rarely a low roll because you cast spells like every single turn of the game when you're playing Shaman. So that thing is just an overstatted 2-drop the majority of the time.
Hey, I got you, friend.
Yeah, this Pano absolutely heartbreaking for Surrender. And you touched upon it earlier, the chances are not that high for such an impactful 8-drop, but certainly Batterhead would be the top of the list here.
Right. Like, if anything, usually Batterhead is an even bigger blowout than this. It's only that Surrender had one Taunt minion in play that the Batterhead couldn't run wild immediately on the first turn that it came out. But preventing it from doing so over the course of multiple turns is nearly impossible when they roll it.
There is little time.
And for Lee here, maybe considering running out the Soul of the Murlocs and getting the 2-4 Automaton to attack the 3-1 here. Actually going to go with Lickum instead, doesn't want to commit the Souls until later on in the game. I mean, at this point, you're pretty far ahead. The Lickum seems just as acceptable of a play.
It does. You are not wrong. Acolyte of Pain, very slow in this situation, but honestly, I'm not sure what card in Surrender's deck was going to dig him out of this mess.
For Lee, after the Batterhead has already dealt so much, are you actually going to evolve it into a 9-drop here?
I mean, his 2-drops are also already 2-4s.
Stormbringer equally good for the mana cost, and that is a very strong roll as well.
Yes, it is.
Looks like it's going to be enough to close out this game. Lee swinging to bring the opponent down to 21, meaning that if he draws an Overload card, the 20 on board and the Lickum, given that Surrender heals, is enough to set up lethal as well.
Yes,
so.
Indeed. Whereas, I mean, that was a very logical explanation you gave. The real explanation is just in honor of Gallon casting BlizzCon, you just always push the 1. That's just how it works in that scenario. But still, very, very strong performance from Lee yet again. And he now finds his way out of Group A. Surrender is going to fall down into the decider match, which I believe will take place tomorrow. He will await the winner of the elimination match in this group, which will happen very shortly later on today. But I think very, very strong performance up until this point from the Chinese player.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm seeing Lee in a lot of these tough spots, right? We've casted 2 series. Lee was given this hand of all damage from Rogue, and he saw the line, took it all to face, and managed to exactly add it up to 30 there. And in the Priest Mirror, he was ahead at one point, but he started falling behind. He realized that, and he went for the Light Warden out, and actually managed to get that as well. So definitely seeing some of these spots where he is behind, but he's following the path that leads him to victory, clenching victory again from the jaws of defeat. So that's kind of where I see Lee right now, a strong player, and even when he's behind, he doesn't lose his goal.
We see here in this series 2 different Paladin decks being available but not being played. Do you think Paladin is going to be a factor in this tournament as we move forward?
I think in the best of 5s, the Highlander Paladin will have its time to shine, but right now it does feel like Priest and Shaman are the dominating forces in our best of 3 group stage.
Well, we can hear now from the man himself. I believe Frodan is standing by on stage to have a word with our Group A winner.
We have our first player through to day number 2 of BlizzCon's Hearthstone Grandmasters Global Finals. It's Lee from Royal Never Give Up. Lee, I want to first ask you, how are you feeling about your playing condition and how well you're playing today with a 2-0 score over your group?
首先想问一下，今天表现得不错，是2-0完成了小组赛的这个赛事，请问你现在感觉如何呢？
就比我想象的顺利吧，然后没什么。
It's better than I expect, so it's just about it.
All right, cool. That was a bad question, I guess. Next question. Do you think your previous experience has helped you a lot, given that last year you were here for the Hearthstone Global Games, where Team China took the victory?
因为你明年也在这个舞台嘛，就是代表中国的 HG 去参加比赛。那现在的话，你觉得那个经验对这次比赛有帮助吗？
很有帮助啊。
The experience really helped a lot.
Man, a few words. Well, here's a one-word answer that you can give as well. Is anyone here traveling alongside with you to support your trip here to Anaheim for BlizzCon?
最后一个问题就是，这次过来 BlizzCon 比赛，有任何人跟你一起过来这边比赛吗？然后去支持你？
就有很多观众来支持我。
There's so many my friends supporting me throughout this trip, so thank you to them.
Great. The last question I want to ask is, who do you think also advances out of Group A alongside with you?
你觉得最后 Group A 的话，谁会跟你一起出现呢？
I don't know.
He said, I don't know.
We don't know either, but we'll find out later this weekend. Thank you very much. Lee is our first member through to the semifinals. Let's give him a round of applause, please. And with that, let's send it back over to our casters at the desk.
Thank you, Frodan. Yeah, we were informed by some of our Chinese members of staff, people are familiar with the China community, that he was known to give very Kalento-style answers in interview questions, and I think we we saw some of that firsthand just there. I think direct and to the point is the best way to describe that.
When they compared him to Kalento, I thought it meant like praising his play, right? But I think they might have meant also, you know, his interactions and mannerisms a little bit.
Yes.
Full package.
I have certainly had a great time interviewing Kalento throughout European Grandmasters up until this point. But clearly, Lee is having a great time in this tournament so far as he finds his way out of Group A. We are going to do the very same thing for Group B now. Gallon and Hunter Ace are going to be here to talk you through it right after this.
BlizzCon 2019 is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of BlizzCon. Facebook Gaming, a world of play. Samsung SSD, performance gamers trust. Corsair, do your thing. And by NVIDIA,